Hello folks, welcome back to Symbols, Patterns, and Gnosis. As always, it's Jason Bickford. And I want to take you on a little journey through a rabbit hole. Hopefully we'll come out with some deeper understanding of some of the esoteric messaging that's in inspired co-creative output. And I like to think of the New Testament as a great example of that, a collection of Christian scriptures that is popular amongst all tribes of Christianity. And that would be the Catholics, the myriad groups of Protestants, and the lesser spoken of Eastern Orthodox and Eastern Christian churches. There's kind of a false dichotomy here in the West of Protestants and Catholics. What's interesting, despite their curious differences that are telling, I want to focus on something they have in common. They all seem to pay lip service to this Roman paradigm and uphold a version of Christianity, although they disagree about some things. The major points of their faith, the Catholics and Protestants in particular, are coming from the Roman Empire. The Romans were inspired to flip the script on their paganism and adopt the guise of Christianity. And then they conducted themselves in a very strange and un-Christian way and genocided a lot of the outlier and different Christian groups that didn't quite get down with what would be basically in the 3rd and 4th century the emergence of the beginning of mainstream Christianity. So, long story short, there's plenty of documentaries on the Nicene Creed and the Council. But essentially, a Roman emperor gets inspired to adopt iconography of Christianity, and he wins a battle. So the story goes. I don't know if that's historically accurate, but what did happen was a whole bunch of Christians in this movement that was sweeping through the Mediterranean and up into Eastern Europe and beyond, was inspiring people, particularly in the concepts coming from Jesus about divine personal sovereignty. And I believe that was probably the most radical idea that needed to get stamped out. And Christ was seen as someone who was advocating for a church which was then monopolized by a state that at the time, a little different than things are now, the military, the church, and the political center were all run by one organization. Now that might be the case now, but it's under the table, it's not out in the open. So this was basically a militarized state-church totalitarian system that mandated let's say a change from the centralized pagan religion of the Roman Empire into this kind of pseudo-Christian or Romanized version of Christianity. What's interesting is that the Christian churches began looking like pagan temples. And there's a lot of interesting language, iconography, and artwork coming out of this period that looks rather pagan or is embedded with downright, let's say, satanic iconography and imagery. And the scriptures themselves kind of warn us of this. And this actually goes back to Daniel in the Old Testament, and the Jewish scriptures document stories, the mythopoetic patterns of which map onto the rise and fall of empires. And many Christians have speculated now that the Roman Empire was actually predicted within the scriptures, both in Daniel as well as in Revelations. Those are what we would call eschatological prophecies. I've got some ideas about why some of these guys were a little insecure, as you can see here, but maybe I'll save that for another video. Very big statues of leaders and emperors were erected. And they also had, again, like this kind of solar deity, pagan iconography blended with the symbols of Christianity. So I believe the Christians were co-opted because of this idea of divine personal sovereignty, which, although there were some enlightened folks coming out of other spiritual traditions before Christianity, this idea of divine sovereign personhood was something that came from Christ. And it was actually a core concept that the founders of the United States and the Puritan Christians embedded within documents like the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. So nowadays we have mainstream Christians paying lip service to the system that oppressed and genocided them back around, well, let's say about 1700 years ago. Here's a clip from my recent Sunday school, in which I go into that a little bit. So I think it's pretty clear once you look at all of the parallels between the canonical Gospels and the methodology which Thomas has written, that it was around before the other Gospels and was part of the inspiration. Over half of the Gospel of Thomas appears in the Synoptic Gospels, and it also has some strange and esoteric and mystical language in common with the Gospel of John as well. Now take a look at what mainstream Christian apologists have to say about Thomas in order to mislead their congregations and followers online so they don't do their own research, which is exactly what Gnosticism or the Gnostic Christian methodology was all about.
So, question 1 from Doug. Do you have any thoughts about the Gospel of Thomas? And here's my thoughts, Doug. When I first heard about the Gospel of Thomas many years ago, I was kind of a noob to this sort of idea of I just thought sort of the New Testament's just there. I didn't realize that there were these these other Gospels. They're actually called Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas, the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Peter. There's a big long list of them. But when I heard of this, and this might be the context that you've heard of it, Doug, possibly, it was as though what we had in the Gospel of Thomas were these other books that are not in the Bible. It was as though we had other authentic forms of Christianity that were sort of selectively left out, purposely left out of the Bible, so that we have kind of like a conspiratorial version of Christianity, just the approved of. And usually people, they like to say this happened at the Council of Nicaea. Oh, well, at the Council of Nicaea, that was when we had the selection of the books, and you get this vision of old men at a table sort of picking books to include in the Bible and throwing other books away kind of arbitrarily or because of their own agendas. Okay, this is so not true. The Gospel of Thomas is one of many, we'll call them Gnostic texts. And the Gospel of Thomas is basically a non-Christian work done to try to hijack Christianity, like the way that modern Jehovah's Witness theology or modern LDS or Mormon theology tries to hijack Christianity and claim, they have a new religion, but they're trying to claim it's Christian. So this is what Gnostics, that's a particular religious group, were trying to do in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. They're trying to take Christianity. It seems like there was something like that happening, in the 1st century as well. So it does claim it was written by the Apostle Thomas, but it's actually a forgery. The Gospel of Thomas is probably written mid-2nd century at the earliest. And I'm going to link an article down below for people who want more data on this. My friend Wesley Huff wrote an article on the Gospel of Thomas, and he has that information there. You guys can check it out, why it's dated so late. Why is it so, it's long after Thomas was dead. Only one full copy exists, and 4 fragmented copies exist of the Gospel of Thomas. We don't have a lot of data to go on, but basically it's a sayings gospel. It doesn't actually record the life of Jesus. It's just unconnected statements, sayings, supposedly from Jesus. And some of them are actually borrowed from Matthew and Luke. They're actually quotes from Matthew and Luke. Now, Matthew and Luke were in all reasonableness written long before the Gospel of Thomas. And the Gospel of Thomas is borrowing from them. But it's the stuff that he adds that's totally not like Jesus at all. It's very Greek, it's not Jewish, and it's weird stuff. So let me give you an example, or a few examples of quotes from the Gospel of Thomas. You guys listen to this and ask yourself if this sounds consistent with a 1st century Jewish teacher, which Jesus was, or if it sounds consistent with the statements of Jesus in the actual real Gospels. Here's one. If the flesh came into being because of spirit, that is a marvel. But if spirit came into being because of body, that is a marvel of marvels. Yet I marvel at how this great wealth has come to dwell in this poverty. This doesn't even sound like Jesus.
Stockholm Syndrome is universally used by psychologists now. It was a term that was coined in 1973 by the media when some people who were kidnapped by some bank robbers ended up identifying and developing strong bonds with their kidnappers. And we see the Christian church has been trauma bonded into a relationship with the Roman Empire. So I want to take a look at this lack of self-love, of self-amor, let's say. When in Rome, speak as the Romans do. Well, in Rome, in Italy, also in Spanish, amor is the word for love. And we have people with a lack of self-love, a lack of, a sense of that divine personal sovereignty, who have now been trauma bonded in a Stockholm Syndrome relationship with their kidnapper. The word Roma in Italian means Rome. So when in Rome, speak as the Romans do as the Romans do. So we're going to spell Rome, Roma. And right away, you can probably see where I'm going with this. Amor is love. So Roma, Rome, spelled backwards, is love. So the opposite of love is Rome. When I think of Rome, I also think of roaming around, right? You're not content where you are. You're not happy at home. You're not happy with yourself. You're roaming around, a vagabond, a wanderer. If you were maybe satisfied, that wouldn't be the case. Spiritual wandering. So amor is love. We spell that L-O-V-E. Let's take a look at this now. If we were to do unto amor as we did with Roma, and we spell love backwards in English, that's E-V-O-L. That's evil. But there's a little bit of a misspelling there. The difference between evil, E-V-O-L, and evil, E-V-I-L, is a difference between the I and the O. So I'm thinking of some mathematics here, some computer language or mathematics language in which ones and zeros are used to represent integers with binary code. So computer code, binary code, digital code, this is the ones and zeros used to represent reality within computer language and mathematics. And we have a phenomenon now that I believe is linked to a social contagion of people identifying themselves as non-binary. Another way to say this is they're gender fluid. They're neither man nor woman. These people aren't happy with the bodies or identity they were born with.
Hi, my name's Ashley Wild and welcome to my channel, Ashley's Wild Life. This week, I want to try to answer the question, what does non-binary even mean? To do so, I'm going to use some illustrations. Sometimes they're coercively assigned male or coercively assigned female at birth, but they don't fit those rigid boxes that society gave us.
Ashley doesn't seem that wild. Maybe that's just me though. But one thing's for sure, society didn't create human anatomy. Society didn't put you in that body.
Moreover, people who are born with penises sometimes grow up to be women. And people who are born with vaginas sometimes grow up to be men. And there's a whole host of people whose genitals are really not important, who fall all over the place in between those two things. So society presents us with two checkboxes. Pick one. Non-binary is an umbrella term, which encompasses all of the people who don't fit in one of those two boxes.
So this girl's probably speaking with the spirit of the age, not by design, but she's talking about not fitting in a box that society gave her. The society didn't give you that box. And box is slang for vagina. So she talks about penis this, vagina that, I don't fit in the box. So basically she's saying that her penis is too big to fit in that box. This is kind of narcissism at work. And it's a joke that goes back to Hebrew scriptures. Heta or hata, Strong's 2403, is the same word in Greek as hamartia. They both mean to sin. So if you say that homosexuals are sinning, this is a joke that everyone has misunderstood. Because hamartia and hata or heta, don't be a heta, don't be a sinner, they're missing the mark, which means they're not getting the joke. It's an archery term, which means to miss the target. That's the same word for sin. In other words, gays are missing the mark. It's a joke about butt sex, people. And we have that language embedded in this gender fluid individual speaking from the heart, which is infested with the spirit of the age. So you don't have to be in the Illuminati to talk in code. And we have, she's too big. Her ego's too big to fit in the box. I'm special. Now you've missed the mark here. You're not fitting in the box. That's a sin. Also, on her shirt, you see, or is it him? I'm not sure how she this person identifies, but you know what? I don't care. Actual gender dysphoria affects about 1 in 10,000 men, hardly any women at all. These people are just not happy with what they got.
See, the key to eating a black and white cookie, Elaine, is you want to get some black and some white in each bite. Nothing mixes better than vanilla and chocolate. And yet still somehow racial harmony eludes us. If people would only look to the cookie, all our problems would be solved.
Oh, your views on race relations are just fascinating. You really should do an op-ed piece for the Times.
Look to the cookie, Elaine. Look to the cookie.
Oh, what is this?
What?
It's a hair.
Oh, take it back. Let's get another one.
Oh, what late as it is? I'll just take it off.
No, come on, really, get another one. It'll take a second.
All right. Excuse me.
Hey, I'm online here.
No, we just bought this. You sold us a cake with that hair on it.
You have to take a number.
So Elaine here is always hanging out with some dudes. She doesn't seem to have any female friends. Maybe she just wants to be one of the guys, so to speak. She has her hair in a bun here, and then she purchased a bun, and it's got a hair in it. So there's a little bit of a joke being played on her. It's a word game, and she doesn't get it. Seinfeld gets it. This other brother with the black and white cookie, he gets it, right? You got to take a little bit of the good with the bad, make a joke out of it. See? He gets it. This dude over here, he gets it, right? He's been around the block a few times. Elaine's new to this game. She wants the immaculate buns. She wants the virgin babka. She wants the babka other people haven't had before. Also, they wanted a chocolate babka, but they were all out, so she got the cinnamon babka. So Elaine's a brunette, but she wants the red bun. So she wants red hair, right? So she's just not happy with her station in life. And now she's going to have to get back in line because she's not cutting in line. She wants the immaculate, unblemished, the extra virgin babka. So she's not happy with what she has. She's too good for it. What's interesting is that Elaine was known for having excellent hair. Maybe not in that episode, but she ended up doing, Julia Louis-Dreyfus did shampoo commercials for Herbal Essence, right? She's got some great hair there, but she's not happy with it in that scene. Narcissists are at risk for developing Facebook addiction. What's this all about? So people in their late teens, very early 20s now have grown up in the information age. The technological revolution of the internet age has completely infested every aspect of their life. I didn't get on the internet until I had already started college. So I grew up unaffected by the internet. So I see the differences. It's a huge difference. So there's academic research that students are in colleges are more narcissistic than ever. Here they're aggressing against their professors, and studies show that there's a higher degree of narcissism among these students than ever recorded.
Got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. These racist teachers have got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. These
Fuck you, George. You don't want to hear a goddamn thing you have to say. You talk so fucking much. No, you shut the fuck up.
These white-ass faculty members need to be holding him and all these people accountable. We don't need to be doing all things.
And as my fellow trustees will attest, Denny's.
Let's look at differences between men and women that are explicitly anatomical and physiological. Are men taller than women on average? Does anyone take offense at that fact? Are you irritated? So I would say You could be irritated by it. You could be irritated by the fact that women have to be the ones to gestate and lactate. You could be irritated by a lot of truths. But taking offense is a response that is rejection of reality. So men and women are different on height. They're different on muscle mass. They're different on where fat is deposited on our bodies, right? Our brains are also different. So there are some binaries.
Security!
Oh, they shut off the volume. Can you hear?
You're too close. I can't actually get you with this lens if you want to be in.
That's really unfortunate. I'm sorry about that. They very obviously don't want to.
So tell me about your thoughts. Tell me about your thoughts.
My thoughts?
Yeah, on the event. Why did you do what you did?
So, if I were to tell you any thoughts about this event, it would be more than this event is worth, honestly. Like, you can't...
But you've come here. You've come here.
You can't argue against, like, what is a fact.
I'm not surprised to find that the first generation of young adults and teenagers raised entirely in the internet era are more narcissistic and addicted to the internet than anybody else. So we have some interesting psychological research here. And it also reflects on homosexuals in particular. Narcissism isn't just higher amongst college students now than ever before, but there is also what Freud suspected is showing up in the literature. This is supported by the results here, that homosexuals score higher on low self-esteem and narcissistic personality index scores. If you think about the homosexual as falling in love with a mirror image, the narcissist sees their own reflection. So many narcissists fall in love with a version of themselves, a member of the same sex. That's not to say that all homosexuals are narcissists, but most true narcissists are fluid in a way, gender fluid, sexually fluid, very often identifying as homosexual. So that's the psychological research. Homosexuals are more narcissistic than other groups. This loaded and symbolic statement of non-binary, and again, I'm suggesting that the spirit of the age is alive within the language of the age. Our vocabulary is at the substrate of co-creating the world we experience. So non-binary is a manifold symbol in language form. And we're also looking at beyond dualism, beyond this concept of good and evil. This is interesting, and it's a rejection of the concept of good and evil to a point where people are above the whole thing. This is interesting. I find an anagram for Roman Empire to be Emperor Mani. Now, Mani was the leader or prophet of a kind of quasi-Christian esoteric religion that had elements of Zoroastrian dualism as well as Jewish mysticism, Christianity. Sometimes it's mislabeled Gnostics. The Manichaeans were not Gnostic. They had a lot of Zoroastrian and Babylonian aspects. But Mani was a prophet of what was the first worldwide religion. It was the first international religion, and it spread across an area that was actually larger than the Roman Empire. And that was around the 3rd, 4th century. It was at its largest. It survived in China until about the 14th century. Now let's go over to Nietzsche. He had a book famously titled Beyond Good and Evil. Nietzsche attacked traditional ethical theories, especially those rooted in religion. He particularly didn't like the New Testament. He rejected the view that people are ultimately accountable only to God. He did so because he believed that human life had no moral purpose except for the meaning that human beings gave it. So There's no real purpose to life. There's an inherent nihilism in Nietzsche. He rejected a morality of intentions by stating that the value of any action lay in the unintentional, especially those motives that are below the surface of the conscious mind. This plays into that inherent bias concept in critical race theory. His new interpretation, which he cast in terms of will to power, was linked to a project he called the reevaluation of values. It revolved around the ideas of an enhancement of life in an attainable, higher reality. After Nietzsche's death, many of his ideas were seized by Nazi thinkers. Nietzsche said, for example, that everyone tries to dominate others, and that a gifted man, someone he called the Overman, or Übermensch, has the right to step out of the mainstream and create his own moral values, beyond good and evil. The Nazis used this idea to justify their own idea of an over-race and an entire race that was superior to others. As a result, Nietzsche is often associated with Nazism despite his dying before the rise of Nazi Germany. Some people say that the association is unfair, but the Nazis translated good and evil and quoted it in their works, and it was an influence on them. Just like some American writers like Edward Bernays' book on propaganda was hugely influential, but people don't call Edward Bernays a Nazi, but he certainly played into their paradigms. So we have beyond good and evil, beyond Rome, beyond the Roman Empire, beyond the rule, and no self-love. This is all embedded in one symbol of Rome, Roma, evil, armor, love. The difference is the I and the O. I want to do a little decoding aside here, keeping in mind the relationship to Manichaeism and that duality and the anti-duality embedded in the term non-binary. And we'll keep in mind the narcissistic personality of the woke movement, which seems to be under a sleep of ignorance.
Newest, latest. Let me tell you the story of right hand, left hand. It's a tale of good and evil. Hate. It was with this hand that Cain iced his brother. Love. These 5 fingers, they go straight to the soul of man. The right hand, the hand of love. The story of life is this.
Let's take a look at the word love. We'll introduce it to its inversion here, and we see C-O-M-E and C-O-W-E, co-we, co-me, and come, and a welcome. Welcome to the Bardo. We're in the post-eschatological world where the Colosseum or the Tower of Babel has fallen, the language is broken, and when we put the languages back together in the mirror, we reveal esoteric information embedded in the pictographic icons of the letters themselves, which are manifold and map out to express other ideas. Co-me would be like me, me, or two me's, or me with myself and beside myself. So the idea here is the people under the spell of the age want the second coming. That's gender fluidity. They want the fluid of the gender. That's the coming. The orgasm. Now women can have multiple orgasms. They also want to have a male orgasm or a female ejaculation. That's something that's been in the paradigms for a while now. They want to have it all. Nothing, it's never enough. The O is the 15th letter and the omega in the Greek alphabet, 15th letter in our English alphabet. And 15 is 555, the number of Yahweh according to the Old Testament. The Jewish scriptures actually don't like writing the number 15 because they associate it with Yahweh, the Creator. So we have an evil empire. That's the name of a Rage Against the Machine album, which embeds in its name, Raging Against the Machine is breaking apart the cogs in the machine, right? It's cog dissonance, and the music is dissonant itself. So we have corporate music from Marxists who are a part of a corporate entity telling you to rage against the machine, and you're going to get cog diss from raging against the machine. You're going to be dissing the cogs. You get it? Let's go over to extra virgin olive oil. So here within this manifold language, which is symbolic and inspired, we also have a symbolic reference to the dipping of the sop. about the betrayal of Christ and Christ's announcement of that betrayal at the Passover or Last Supper. EVOL, extra virgin olive oil. This would be used for salad dressings, marinades, and the sop. And olive oil was prominent all over the Mediterranean, still is. It's a staple there. So Jesus is anointed on his feet with a fragrant oil by a woman. And Christ says, this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, and what she has done will also be told in memory of her. So this woman who anointed Christ in the oil is going to be famous. And that is followed immediately after in the Gospel of Matthew by Judas betraying Jesus, the announcement of which. So there's a Passover dinner. This is when the Jews are conducting this kind of witchcraft where they spread the blood of a slaughtered goat over, and it's the firstborn, right? So you get your firstborn goat or lamb, you spray the blood over the door of your house, and then the evil spirits will leave you alone. And meanwhile, while that's going on, Christ is symbolically a Passover sacrifice for the Gentiles and the Christian Jews. So we have a dinner here where Christ is reclining at table with his disciples, and he says, "Who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me." So there's different, some people mention the sop, some people just mention the dipping of the bread. So he says one of the 12 is going to betray him. Judas, who would betray him, answers to Christ, "Is it I, Rabbi?" And Christ says to him, "You have said so." This is a very interesting statement. It's almost like Christ is using Yoda talk here. Judas uses words that can be rearranged to say, "Rabbi, it is I," or "It is I, Rabbi." So we have Judas kind of already knows that it's him, right? Because he suspects. He doesn't know for certain. He's uncertain. There's also symbolism here that Judas wants to anoint with Christ by dipping his hand in there because he wants to get oil on Christ the way that Mary Magdalene did, or Mary the prostitute did in the story that precedes this one. So we have embedded symbolic stories in the scripture in Matthew that are, well, let's just say you take the story of the anointing the feet with oil and you look at it symbolically in its esoteric pattern, and then you look at the story that's juxtaposed with it in which Christ announces that the person who anoints him at the dinner or dips into the oil with him is going to be betraying him. So one way to say this is that Judas wanted to be anointed with the oil the way Christ was. He wanted to be like Christ. In other words, he wasn't happy with what he had. The word extra virgin, or the term extra virgin olive oil, is an anagram for love or exiling trivia. That reminds me of that famous song from Jimi Hendrix, Love or Confusion. Is this love or is it confusion? Judas didn't know what he wanted. He wanted to be like Mary, the woman who anointed Christ's feet. He attempts to engage with this symbolic event with the oil and Christ's hand in the dipping bowl at the same time Christ is using it. In other words, he's not waiting his turn. I want to be anointed with Christ. I want to be like Christ. I want to be my own Christ. I want to be the most beloved. I want to be like the woman who anointed Christ, who was then had stories told about her. So this is all embedded in that one phrase, and the symbolism is manifold, like I said. It takes a particular type of gnosis to see this, and then once you know it's there, you can find it all over the place. So Judas needs to pick a side and play the game, and Christ knows that in order to fulfill the messianic prophecy, there's going to be a traitor. It could have been Peter, who denounced him several times. It could have been some of the other students. But it turns out it was Judas, because Judas didn't know, right? Is it I, Rabbi? So he doesn't know. He's not certain. He's not all in. And if he's not all in, he doesn't know it's not him. Other disciples probably thought to themselves, I would never do that, and they know it's not them. Extra virgin olive oil is an anagram for love taxiing over Liri, which is an Italian river. So love is going to take you over the river. That's a reference to crossing the river Jordan with Joshua, or Yeshua, in the book of Joshua in the Old Testament. So Christ is going to get you over the hump. But you have to have faith. You have to be all in. You can't pussyfoot in order to walk on water. You have to do it. You have to be all in. There's a symbol in the book of John in which Christ says, you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood. And then the disciples have a hard time hearing that. And then a few sentences later, he says, the flesh is of the flesh isn't important. What he's saying symbolically here at the Passover dinner is, here, take this bread, take this wine. This is my flesh. This is my blood. So he tells them it's not about cannibalism. It means you have to be willing to do what it takes in order to have a seat at my table. And if you do, you're all in, then I'm going to get you across the river to the promised land. Let's take a look at some more symbolism here. Manifold symbolism. Is it I, Rabbi? 4 words. 1, 2, 3, 4. We rearrange them to say, Rabbi, it is I. And that's the 4th word, the 2nd word, the 1st word, and the 3rd word. So we have a different, same spelling, but different order. Something's out of order here. Now, the 4th gospel is John, and then we have the 2:13, that's the 2:13, and this is when Christ is cleansing the temple and kicking the traitors out of his Father's home in the Gospel of John. So, Gospel of John, 4th gospel, 2:13, begins the story of the cleansing of the temple. And so these are the people that are all about the money. They don't want what Christ has to offer. They want the prestige. They want the material, the mammon. And then Christ gets violent. That's the one time he does in the scriptures. So here we have the story here where Christ is telling a story about the woman who anointed his feet. People are like, why did you let this prostitute or this risque woman come in here and touch you like that? And he said, what she has done, stories will be told about her. So Judas wanted stories told about him. He was in the inner circle at the table. So he took some Gnosis and then spread it to the Roman Empire and betrayed Jesus. He betrayed his trust. Is it I, Rabbi? Well, he's not all in, so he might as well say, Rabbi, it is I. Let's go over to YouTube real quick. So I wanted to access the Jordan Peterson podcast, so I typed JBP podcast. That's the tagline that he's known as. And immediately I saw this, Joe Budden podcast, Trauma Bonding, just posted 2 days ago. Now, trauma bonding was something I was dealing with in The Seduction of the Innocent, and it's a concept embedded in the Kubrick syncography. Listen to this.
Why, if you're a kid, though?
If I'm a kid, I would want to.
Yeah.
Well, no.
If you're a teenager, bro, there's nothing wrong with a virgin.
Oh, I'm about to serious out the joke combo, but I'm down with it. Today, what do they see that makes them see value in
virginity? Yeah, you're
that?
Right. You're right. That's what I'm saying. Like I don't think a 19-year-old male wants to meet a virgin today. There's nothing that would appease them about a virgin. Appeal to them. Appeal to them? Same shit. Yo, that's crazy. Your brain, yo. Yeah. You right, though. I never thought about that, I guess, because we older, but...
I'm sure virgins still exist, guys.
Somewhere. They're like VCR tapes.
Where? Yeah. Well, yeah, it's VCR. Somewhere.
Like, yo, I know, man.
Somebody got a VCR.
Yeah, they got one.
But,
yo, I know a bunch of people in education. In the
shout out to the virgins listening. If you are indeed a virgin, find a way to communicate that to us. Tweet us. Leave it in the comments.
So Judas either wants to be Mary Magdalene or he wants to be another Christ. Now I'm taking a look at Joe Budden here. He's a rapper, also a podcaster. He's had a little bit of a meltdown. The difference between him and the Jordan Peterson podcast is the extra P. And the extra P is a nickname for the large professor, or the large rabbi, the large teacher, right? Large professor is... Well, let's see, here on this album, Reliving, he's got a song called Sophia, yo. And I found it interesting that the symbolism on the cover here looks like he's wearing a suit I've seen on Mario, the video game character, the Italian plumber. So this is also some iconography. The light around him is iconography I used in some of my Sophia artwork you see here. And that's used by a lot of... Latino artists when depicting Mary, the mother. Anyway, Large Professor made a name for himself back in the late 80s, early 90s. He's a rapper and a professor. You've probably heard some of his beats, even if you don't have his albums, because he produced a lot of stuff for Nas. He was a part of the Illmatic album, a legendary hip-hop album. He's there on Life is Good. What does this have to do with Budden? Budden is a rapper turned podcaster who's had a bit of a career meltdown lately after screwing some of his alleged friends out of some money and then firing them from his podcast. I didn't know anything about this until I went looking for Jordan Peterson, the large professor, and I ended up finding Joe Budden, who's got the JBP initials on his podcast. So he's kind of siphoning off some of Jordan Peterson's fans there and having a career meltdown. So he's a rapper, he's not a producer, so he wants the good life, he wants to be down with Sophia Yo, and he's getting a little too greedy. So he's more of a Judas than a Mary Magdalene. He's not willing to die for it, he's not all in, he'd rather take the money and run, and he's willing to screw over his friends. And I found it interesting that just a couple days ago, he did a podcast called Trauma Bonding, and he doesn't mention the term trauma bonding in that podcast. I listened to it actually just looking for a quote for my next Seduction of the Innocent video, and I thought it was curious timing. But it turns out that he's going on some rant about how if he was a kid, he'd want a virgin, and the benefit of having relationships with virgins. And a number of people in the comment section told him that's inappropriate material and we don't want to hear that kind of thing coming from you again. So there's love and then there's greed. There's love and then there's Roma. So Christ spoke and taught a message of love, forgiveness, and divine personal sovereignty. And Roma is the machine, right? You don't have divine personal sovereignty. You do what we say you do, or we'll kill you. You stop reading those particular scriptures, or we will kill you. You follow our rules, or we will kill you. We don't love you, we rule over you. This is the evil empire versus the empire of Christ. And the symbols within the teachings of inspired scripture map onto patterns in the media, because the media is co-created with the same co-creative faculty and influence of the Holy Spirit from God to us. So the Holy Spirit acts as a mediator and inspires things that we create. And there's a spirit of the age that's a bit antichrist. And that antichrist spirit embeds things in, say, podcasts from Joe Budden about virgins and trauma bonding, or about the trauma bonding relationship that Christians have with the Roman Empire. And the main point here is the Gnostics disabuse themselves of this whole shit show and just talk to God themselves.
Nice try. There's nothing wrong with being friendly and jovial. The song will go off and it'll be overdue. Don't try to get attached, cause you might get snatched by the collar by a 4-degree black belt scholar that seen you on the floor dancing with Sophia. Yo, seen you on the floor dancing with Sophia. Seen you on the floor dancing with Sophia. Yo, seen you on the floor dancing with Sophia. Seen you on the floor dancing with Sophia. Yo, seen you on the floor dancing with Sophia. Seen you on the floor dancing with Sophia. Yo, seen you on the floor dancing with Sophia. Now that's what's happening.